Good afternoon, Patriots, and welcome to the 208th audio chat on the QNewsPatriot Rumble channel series. I am the QNewsPatriot, joined this Independence Day by auditor and jurisdiction subject matter expert, Mr. Todd Duell. My name is SG Anon. Patriots, as we celebrate today the 250-year anniversary of the cherished Declaration of Independence, one of the most profound and significant documents in all of human history and the one that birthed our American Republic, I could not think of anyone better to bring on to the show than Mr. Duell. Todd has a storied track record helping ordinary people reclaim their true and authentic jurisdiction over themselves, their actions, and their lives using the very codes, statutes, laws, and precedents originally crafted to confuse the ordinary layperson into slavery and ultimately oblivion. We've got an incredible discussion lined out for everyone today, including an on-video moment of a judge in New York State fleeing the courthouse after being identified by a competent and equipped defendant for the commission of a felony. And if that sounds unbelievable, you really won't believe the response of the NYPD to that same person after declaring his intent to perform a private citizen's arrest. Before we get underway, let's hear a quick word from today's chat sponsor, BF7 by Juvenon, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Patriots, we could describe the post-COVID world in a lot of different ways, but on a personal note, the biggest differences for my family and I between pre-2020 and post-2020 really center around two main areas: the broad public awakening that we talk about often on this show, and the challenges to maintaining and improving personal health and vitality. I can't speak for all of you out there, but with respect to that inside our household, one of the biggest changes we've seen over the last 5 years has been a noticeable drop in vigor and energy levels. Going into COVID, for example, I was working as a full-time upper mid-level business manager between 45 and 65 hours a week, and it was nothing at all for me to come home after work every day, even on the long weeks, split the housework up, and be an involved and active dad. These days, I keep a schedule that's slightly less than 45 hours each week, with different and arguably less stress than a few years ago. And by the time I hit 9 p.m., it feels like I could fall asleep standing up. I blame that on a lot of different things, from disrupted hormones and American frankenfoods to the biologically altered reality of our world. But over the last 5 years, I've also learned that a major cause of depleted vitality is a deficiency of something called nitric oxide molecules, blood-borne molecules that help relax the body's blood vessels, veins, and arteries, ultimately resulting in better blood flow and circulation to areas of the body that often find themselves shortchanged once our main internal organ systems are provided for. Big Pharma will charge you anywhere from 9 to 20 times the standard market value for their nitric oxide boosting prescriptions, when effective supplements for blood and circulation support exist and are on the free market already. I've tried a couple of these myself over the last few years, but I recently got the chance to try Blood Flow 7, made by Juvenon. And I have to say, Patriots, I think it really works. BF7 is a triple action supplement with clinical studies behind it that show a 150 to 200% increase in nitric oxide production and a widening of vessel and arterial channels by over 50% from baseline. This translates to better flow and more oxygen and nutrition being delivered to both critical and non-critical bodily systems. I've been taking 2 capsules right after breakfast each morning, and I've noticed better stamina, better focus, and more vitality, even on the days where I skip my morning coffee. It's made with naturally derived ingredients, including the inactive fillers, and customer reviews found online suggest people are noticing real results with BF7 in just hours and days rather than weeks or months. Additionally, Juvenon offers a full 60-day empty bottle money-back guarantee on their product in the unlikely event that a customer out there isn't fully satisfied with their experience. You can try Blood Flow 7 by Juvenon for a little over $1 a day by navigating to www.bloodflowthenumber7.com/QNP or clicking the link below today's video. Once again, that is www.bloodflowthenumber7.com/QNP or look for the link in the description box below. It worked for me, and I hope it works for you too. Thanks. All right, and we're back. Todd, thank you again for joining us on QNewsPatriot for what's going to be an incredible Independence Day conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We've got a good topic for everybody today in terms of understanding what your rights are and how to affect them, given the government is doing everything in their power to take your First Amendment right to redress away and your right to redress the elective franchise under Title 28 in the court. So that's 28 U.S.C. 1343. They're trying to take all your rights away from you. And we're down to very, very few remedies left to enforce your rights.
Indeed, and I think that really should be the flavor of the conversation today. What are those constitutional rights, and how can we work within the construct, the craftsmanship, if you will, that our opponent has crafted over a period of many, many decades? You know, you sent me a video taken by an individual in New York State, which depicts the judge in a case fleeing the courthouse, in the act of fleeing the courthouse. I don't know about those watching the show, but for my part, I find it patently amazing, especially given the level of resistance that ordinary people get when they go to their local county courthouse or their city courthouse, especially since those courts are almost always administrative courts of the Internal Revenue Service and not actual common law courts of record designed to adjudicate common law issues. So we're going to show this video really quick if you don't care, and then afterward, it would be wonderful if you would break down for us what exactly happened. Give me just a moment here
Yeah,
and let me
I'll give
pull
you the
this up.
basic. Yeah, I'll give you the basic framework.
All right, bear with us just one moment out there, folks. Let me pull this up. Now, this is a bit of a grainy cell phone video. I have maximized the volume as much as I can get it to. Let's turn these speakers all the way up. And then I have put the speed on approximately 9/10 normal so that it is more intelligible.
The judge has officially left the building, by the way.
Incredible. So if you don't care, Todd, what is actually happening within this video and what occurred next?
Yeah, the person in this particular case is in the courthouse because they understand what their standing is with the alleged creditor on the other side. Of course, what they're going after is there's no personal jurisdiction over them because there's no contract present. There's no certified accounting and there's no charging instruments of any kind in the record of the court because the other side is, represented by bar attorneys, and the bar attorneys don't understand accounting, and their job is to basically conceal and commit as much fraud as possible against you and see if they can get away with it. And so the person eventually came to me and said, "Hey, what do I do in this scenario where they're blocking all remedy?" I said, the remedy that you're up against now is you have to understand that the entire process, because it's an administrative court, is a trust. And in this particular case, there is no trustee for the bank because they're gone at this, according to the Treasury Department. And so realistically, what's happening is the judge is the trustee and the nominee for the bank. So the judge is taking all the liability for the bank at this point. So because they weren't going to follow any state or federal laws, contract law, you name it, they were basically violating so many laws, it's crazy. So I said, go ahead and just revoke and revest the trust in a notice motion order of the court. And when you're in court, make sure that you alert the judge that you've revoked and revested the trust and that you are here to effect a private citizen's arrest for embezzlement. And so as soon as he did that, the judge basically, according to him, got up and immediately fled the courtroom because he got on his phone and he dialed 911. He said, "I'm going to have you arrested. This is a private citizen arrest." So the judge understood exactly what revoking and revesting the trust is because it places him in a position of massive criminal liability operating outside of his jurisdiction, because as the trustee and nominee for the bank, he's required to wind up the trust and liquidate everything and do the final accounting and deliver it to him and potentially provide him with a set off and even maybe a refund. And since we're dealing with not only the note, but we're also dealing with the securitization of the note, which is the trust that we're after for the accounting, that could be a very, very large refund. And if the judge isn't providing the accounting, the bank's not providing any accounting, they're all subject to, a bunch of criminal charges. And so even if I walk down the basic list, I mean, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I'm looking at 20 federal crimes and 20 state statutory crimes. So 40 crimes have been committed once you revoke and revest the trust and you understand what your standing is at that point, because you're no longer the surety at that point. You are now the beneficiary, and they're operating in a fiduciary position, and they have to perform. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And so they're actually looking at quite a bit of prison time, and last time I calculated this, I think the statutory penalties on the federal side, at least, started around 13 million, just for the penalties that go along with it. And then the state statutory side, you never know because they don't ever tell you what the penalties are for the state statutory side, which is, that's the problem in the disparity. The federal side, they tell you the amount of the penalty so you can see what's coming at you. The state side, you don't even really find out until after you either settle or you go to a jury trial, and then at the end it's sentencing, then the judge tells you what the accounting is. So don't ever let these administrative courts tell you that there's no accounting. There's 100% accounting. I don't care if it's a criminal case. I don't care if it's a civil case. Everybody's in that courtroom praying for relief, right? This is what you see in every pleading to the court from a bar attorney. They're praying for the relief that the judge will tell them what the accounting is because they're not capable of producing that.
Absolutely remarkable. So what really happened here was you had an individual that was aware that accounting records were being either shielded or withheld or not properly adjudicated in the fashion that they needed to be. This individual was actively being denied or told that such accounting did not exist. And so this individual, leveraging a statute that is actually on the books in New York State, initiated the sequence of events for a private citizen's arrest. If you don't mind me asking, when the call was made to local law enforcement, how did they respond?
Well, obviously he's right there in the courtroom, so they're not able to respond immediately. He said he did actually hang up and then go back home afterwards, but I recently got a text from him stipulating that he had called the police earlier today, as a matter of fact, and they said that they would actually participate and assist him in making the private citizen arrest. And the reason why he did that is because he actually used the statutory power and authority that's granted to him in the state of New York. And so because felonies have been committed, the statute in New York is New York Criminal Procedure Law, Section 140.30. And, as we go through this discussion today, I actually have all 50 states, both misdemeanor, felony, statutory authority for private citizen arrest, whether you're capable of doing it or not, depending on the statute in the state. So, but we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But that was the breakthrough right there, is that he basically told the police officers under the statutory authority he had the right to do it because he's a firsthand witness. And in the state of New York, he was doing that to prevent someone from taking immediate flight. The judge took immediate flight from the courtroom, and so he had the right to arrest him.
Literally fleeing the scene of a felony.
Yeah, fleeing the scene of a crime that he committed.
Remarkable. And so I have to admit, Todd, with this particular application of the citizen's arrest doctrine, I became very curious about what exactly citizen's arrests are in the United States of America, how that process itself is allowed to work. Because, of course, when we start talking about the application of real-time physical force, one person onto another, it gets very hairy very quickly. Do you mind to break down for the audience out there, what is the mechanism by which these things are leveraged and exercised in certain places around the United States? And is there a correlative or a corresponding code or statute or law in all of the several states that allows this type of activity to occur?
Yes, absolutely. And I actually do have an article that hopefully you can post for everybody. I know it's on my LinkedIn page as well. It's actually called Vilifying the Vigilante, a Narrowed Scope of Citizens Arrest. It is published in the Cornell Journal of Law and Public Policy, volume 25. Starts on page 557. It was written in conjunction with Barnard Welsh, who's a scholar and professor of law and justice at the American University of Washington College of Law. I believe he also taught at University of Pennsylvania and got his JD from Harvard. So we're not talking about somebody that's not capable of writing something like this. There were significant researchers on this project, and it was published in their law reviews. So it does have a lot of merit behind it. I've reviewed it. It's written very, very well. And let me just go over the first part of it, which I think really sets the tone, which is the doctrine of citizens arrest in the United States has been ignored for far too long. In every jurisdiction in the United States, a private person may lawfully detain another and often may even use physical force to do so. Placing such power in the hands of ordinary untrained individuals creates the possibility that citizens will misuse or abuse the privilege, sometimes with serious consequences for both the arrestor and arrestee. The risk is compounded by the disparate treatment of the citizen's arrest document in the different jurisdictions and the ambiguities inherent in many of the doctrine's key features, such as whether one may arrest another only on suspicion of a felony or also for a misdemeanor or breach of the peace, the level of probable cause required to make an arrest, the length of detention that is legally permitted, and the appropriate amount of force used to effect the arrest. So I agree with a lot of the things that the author of this says in the process, and I've taken the time to produce a list of all 50 states for misdemeanors and felonies, whether you have the statutory right to make the arrest under each of those statutes. For example, in the state of Connecticut, you can't not arrest for a misdemeanor. Okay, but for a felony, you can arrest under reasonable belief and to prevent flight. Or, for example, a good one is in Hawaii, you can arrest for a misdemeanor if it's committed in your presence or a felony committed in your presence. Now, in the context of what we're talking about here for the particular person for the video, they revoked and revested the constructive trust in front of the trustee, and the trustee ran, right? So the trustee has basically admitted to committing embezzlement against you. They've admitted to committing 20 state felonies and 40 and 20 federal felonies in front of you. And so for example, in Hawaii, that would be revised statute 803-3. You absolutely have the right to private citizen arrest. And then as you follow that forward and you look at the statute, it tells you, this is what if people want to go this route, be very careful. You are going to be scrutinized heavily if you do this, if you violate somebody's Fourth Amendment rights, Fifth Amendment rights. If you injure them in any way, you're going to be more heavily scrutinized than the police officers because they actually have immunity. You don't. Right? You will have, if you do it wrong, you could have civil liability. If you do it wrong, you could have criminal liability if it turns out you kidnapped them, right? So usually what I tell people is read the statute, tells you what your authority is, always call the police, right? The police force, some states, the sheriff has police arresting powers. Other times you have to call the police, depends on your jurisdiction, you need to know. Your statute will tell you. So, for example, in Hawaii, I believe it's 708, section 300 through 310 tells you exactly how to detain the person, right? These are the same statutes that the arresting officers have to follow. Just do what the statute says. Try to minimize any amount of harm that you cause the other person. I would suggest that while you're detaining them, don't, physically harm them in any way. Do as much, off hands as you can. To detain a person, but make sure that you understand that the statute that you have is going to be effective when the police show up and you're calling them. I suggest to people, print out the statute for your arresting authority, print out the statutes for how to detain a person, print those out. So when the authorities show up and you also have a list of the crimes that have been committed in your presence, right? Have those printed out and just say, I will sign an affidavit of complaint, a criminal complaint. And here's the statute. You must arrest them under this statute. This is the law. You must follow it. Okay. So this is a very nice white paper from Cornell Journal of Law, and I've taken the time to specify the statutes for the misdemeanors and felonies in all 50 states for everybody. Be very, very careful with this. Understand the framework in which you're going at this, because in many cases, we're looking at both federal and state felonies. So you can't just charge somebody with federal felonies. Usually the threshold to charge somebody with these felonies is very, very high and almost requires like an indictment first. But on the state statutory side, it's kind of like, we'll throw something against the wall and see what sticks. We'll arrest you now and figure it out later. That's what the states do, right? At the federal side, they do a significant investigation and probably do indictments first before they come after you. Except on the IRS side, right? The IRS can seize your books anytime they see fit. So the IRS side is a very easy side to catch these people on, because what's everybody doing? What are we seeing in the news? Everybody's committing tax evasion. Everybody's embezzling, right? Everybody's doing all kinds of accounting fraud all over the place. And, I kind of attune it to United States versus Al Capone, right? I think the government took a page from his book, which is don't keep any books, keep multiple sets of books, have the books scattered all over the place so you can't actually get them. Have a restricted securities terminal at the IRS that only the banks can access, so you as a private citizen can never get a hold of your true accounting records. I mean, it's literally concealment. It's literally 26 USC 7206, fraud, false statements, and concealment to defraud you. If anybody even reads that statute, I think your mind is going to be blown away. What's actually happening to you at a very core level is as a crime every single day. And it is charged as a crime by the IRS. So it's really easy to catch these people because that's what they're doing. And they can't avoid it, and they know it. And as you see in the courtroom, right? You saw the evidence right there in that courtroom. The judge got really scared and ran because he demanded the accounting. And he demanded, if you don't produce it, I'm going to arrest you. Right. And I also wanted to point out one more thing, too. All of these statutes, guess what? Last summer, 2025, virtually every state updated their private citizen arrest statutes, and so did the IRS. So Part 9.
Fascinating.
12.3.2, non-statutory authority to arrest. The IRS literally enacted the ability for every single IRS agent to make a non-statutory arrest, meaning they don't have to have DOJ authorization. They can make a private citizen arrest. And what did they warn their agents? Make sure you follow the local policies for private citizen arrest, because you have civil and possibly criminal liability if you do it wrong.
At both the state and federal levels.
Yes. So they said you have the ability to do it. Just be very, very careful how you go about it.
Todd, we missed it just a second ago. Do you mind to refresh me on the operative code that was updated with?
Oh, the Internal Revenue Manual, it's section 9.4.12.3.2. So everybody can go and read that. You can see that they have authorized all their agents to make private citizen arrests.
Absolutely incredible. And just
Right.
for the audience out there, it goes without saying that this discussion today is not an endorsement of this particular methodology. You want to try and use the focus of de-escalation, reasonability, etc. But at the same time, it is worth acknowledging as we go through this 250th birthday party for this incredible republic and the Declaration of Independence that it always was about giving the power to the people in a way that the people were able to exercise it in a measured, lawful, and channeled way. And I want to bring up something really quick with that, Todd, if I could, from that Cornell article we were discussing just a moment ago. In the introductory paragraph, it does say, ask any adult, and more than likely not a significant number, have played the childhood game called Cops and Robbers. But if you ask that same group of adults later in life, few will know that they can actually play the game for real. Citizens are legally permitted to play the role of police officers under the doctrine of a citizen's arrest. Citizens have the ability, but not the duty, to arrest for misdemeanors or felonies, or both, depending on the jurisdiction. Most states have statutes that permit some form of citizen's arrest with various conditions and permutations, resulting in a fragmented application of the doctrine across the United States of America. So back to your point a moment ago, Todd, it is powerfully important and deadly serious to be certain the authorities that you're acting within and under, and what the allegations or situation presenting itself, what it actually is, and what the wrongdoing or the injurious components of that actually are.
Right, right. Yeah, you definitely should have your evidence ready to go. You should definitely have these statutes researched, which have or will be committed by a particular crime. For example, after you revoke and revest, now all the accounting crimes come into play, which they know that in a fiduciary position, every fiduciary, I think this is Restatement of Law of Trusts. I think it's section 83, which basically says that the trustee has a duty to wind up the trust and give you a final accounting and distribute the property. Right? They understand this at a very core level, that you are the grantor of these contracts, you are the beneficiary, and they are in a fiduciary/trustee position. They understand those core concepts that go along with this. And with that said, they also understand as well that when you're dealing with the government, that you're dealing, and this is where people misunderstand constitutional rights and things of that nature, which were waived under the Ashwander Doctrine, because you're asking for benefits and privileges because you're using your public corporate entity out in public to walk around and contract all over the place, whether it's either assenting or consenting by an express contract. But what most people need to understand where the court's getting their jurisdiction over you when you show up is what's called the minimum contact doctrine. And that's the case International Shoe Company versus State of Washington. Basically says that the state doesn't have personal jurisdiction over you until such time that you sign a contract with them. So they have tag jurisdiction, assumption of jurisdiction, in rem jurisdiction. They have all these different types of personal jurisdictions, but they cannot enforce anything, a contract in law, and they can't enforce it in equity against you until you sign the contract, right? Again, when the state's coming at you. And so the state never has a semblance. This is the concealment part, the 26 USC 7206, the concealment. The state never can prove a contract that you've signed with them. They can never produce their certified accounting records because they're basically taking a page from Al Capone and his accounting team. And they can never produce the charging instruments. They can never produce the securities because they know as soon as they do, you're going to claim aggravated identity theft and securities fraud against them because there's no contract. There's no power of attorney. There's no security agreement. There's no UCC filings. There's nothing. They're signing this stuff against you in advance, hoping to God that you're going to sign a contract with them. And then that gets turned into a novation where they have no liability at that point because you waived your rights. Right? That's the disgusting thing of all of this is they're using the minimum contact doctrine against you, hoping to God that you'll contract with them because they don't have one. And they can't prove it. And they can't prove power of attorney or any of that stuff, agency, or they can't prove anything. They have nothing. Everything's an assumption and a presumption.
Powerful, and I think important points to remember. That carries me to another question here about the actual jurisdictional landscape that's occurring in real time. We've had discussions on air before, as a matter of fact, on this show, where we've discussed the idea of common law injury crimes. In other words, where there's material harm, material injury that has occurred and needs to be remedied and indemnified. And then this concept of revenue crimes, like a speeding ticket or a jaywalking or parking in a parallel spot beyond certain hours, crimes that are being charged back as financial instruments, but where no material harm, no physical injury or material injury to another party occurred. Do you mind to explain for the audience the difference between those two, and how does that work with this jurisdictional issue? Because most people, in my experience, Todd, are in court not because they've seriously harmed another person, but because they have committed some sort of revenue-based infraction.
Correct. Yeah, they're doing some type of revenue crime. So your regulatory infraction legislative jurisdiction is actually commercial in nature. It's civil in nature. They're hoping that you sign a contract with the state agreeing to be the surety for the debtor, and you're going to pay and perform some type of penalty. And so under the Sixth Amendment, when you start asking, what's the nature of the accusation, what you're really after is, I need to know the civil nature. Because we have a blended law form jurisdiction, we have law, equity, admiralty, maritime, all wrapped into civil law, right? And so the courts don't want to acknowledge that. They just keep saying statutory, and we're just like, well, I need to know the civil nature of your accusation because I know you blended everything together, and I know at the end of this case, you're going to do an accounting. So let's just get the accounting now. Oh, you don't have it? Well, that's concealment. So I'm going to administratively default you because you don't have a contract, you don't have accounting, and you don't have the securities that you open because this is statutory in nature. It has to be bonded. Right? So they don't have proof of anything until you sign a contract with them and agree to pay and perform. And so that's the administrative, judgment default because they can't prove anything. Right? You're hauled into a court, you've been summoned. So that's where you have to understand minimum contact doctrine. If you're just walking around in public, you're under the minimum contact doctrine. You're under the territorial jurisdiction of the federal government. You're under the state and local authority in whatever state you're in. So they do have the ability to summons you, whether you sign the ticket or not. It doesn't matter. You've been noticed to appear. So for those of you that think that you're going to send a notice to the court and you don't have to appear in court. No, that's wrong. You don't understand the minimum contact doctrine. You've been summoned to appear. It doesn't mean that you're guilty, but it means that you need to show up and you need to address the contract with the state that you're about to enter into. Right. And that's it. You don't really have to be scared going into the court. You just kind of show up and you're just file the right notice, motion, and order in the court, demanding to see the contract, demanding to see the accounting and the charging instruments. They don't have it. If they don't have it, they can't prove that they have personal jurisdiction over you, and they can't prove in res or in rem jurisdiction against you. They can prove nothing. Right? All they can do is talk on the record of the court. They can't actually produce any evidence for the court to prove their case that they have jurisdiction over you as a living person, right? And that's exactly what International Shoe Company says, that the way that the corporations or the government, which is an artificial entity, gets jurisdiction over a living person is only through a contract. That is the only way. So I have to suggest to everybody, there's the idea of, don't contract when you're in court, or understand the contract that you're about to sign with the court if it's an acceptance. But definitely don't run around and think that you don't have to have a driver's license or anything like that because it's a contract and you're not going to contract with the state. They've pretty much wrapped that stuff up at this point, and you're in public and you don't understand minimum contact doctrine, which means you do have to comply with the statutes and codes and ordinances, because you can't just run around and do whatever you want. But understand that, don't be afraid if you have to go to court. They don't have a contract with you with the state, right? Your contract is with the DMV to have a driver's license, but you don't have a contract with the state to pay any fines, fees, penalties, or anything. They don't have a matching liability on their ledgers. They don't. They're hoping to God to get one from you, and that you'll just pay. Right? But we don't have to fight with them at all. But if we go in there and you understand your position, that they've created a trust, right? You have to understand that they've already signed your name to a bunch of stuff. That makes you the grantor and the beneficiary. And if they're signing your name to documents, that means they're the trustee and have some type of power of attorney. Put them on spot, revoke and revest the trust. And if they don't want to handle the accounting and close the accounts, you have a right to private citizen arrest. You're still a private citizen no matter what. Even if you're operating in public, you're still a private citizen, right? And that's not to withstand the concept of when you're in your house, you're definitely in private property. That's a different issue for search and seizure, but you're always a private citizen. Stop accepting the benefits and privileges of the public entity. And a lot of this nonsense stuff goes away. And a lot of that is affected by your proper structuring with the trust, so you stop contracting in your name.
Absolutely fascinating. Point of clarification for the audience out there: when we're talking about this hypothetical scenario, being summoned to appear either for a traffic ticket or a revenue-based infraction, and again, this being completely separate from like true material common law crimes, common law injuries where there's been serious physical harm between individuals, in that process, being summoned into that courtroom and being presented with the allegations and being asked to pay these certain fees, etc. Just again, point of clarification for the audience: the trust establishment component, when we're talking about trust, that's a trust against your own birth certificate. Is that correct?
Yeah, the birth certificate, the birth certificate is what's funding it ultimately for the monetary system. So it's basically, they're funding it through the bid performance and payment bond using that mechanism. But remember, on the bid performance and payment bond, you have a principal, which they try to say is you. They try to say the surety is you. But then you also have to understand is there is a secondary obligor, which is bonding and underwriting. And so if you can't or won't pay, I should say, clarify, if you can't pay, because we can't pay because there is no money in our system, then the secondary obligor, meaning bonding and underwriting, has to come forward and they have to settle and close the accounts. This is what they don't want you to know, is who's the bonding and underwriting company for that. Because number one, if the bonding and underwriting company finds out that a fraudulent security was created and you never signed it and there was no power of attorney, there's no agency agreement, there's no security agreement, they're not covering it, which means that the prosecutor is going to have to cover the liability. What if the liability is in the millions of dollars? Most of these bar bonds are only like $100,000 for the bar attorneys. They don't have that kind of capital in many cases, or revenue sitting in their bank account to pay that, because they're personally liable for the fraud they brought into the courtroom. So of course they're going to fight you tooth and nail because they understand that bonding and underwriting is not going to cover them as soon as that security comes forward and you start calling fraud, right? No bonding and underwriting company covers fraud ever. And I'm of the presumption these days that there actually is no bonding and underwriting for the securities that are being sold in the international bond market because nobody will cover these things because they understand that they are coming from a fraudulent representation of a bond or a security with no contract, no security agreement.
Remarkable. And that ties me over to the next question in our discussion today, and that's with this concept of jurisdiction at birth and what it really means to be born free. You know, we've talked on air before about something called the Birthright movie, which is a positively incredible constellation of, and really it's a huge amalgamation of all of these different subject matter experts on this exact issue, this exact topic, delivering their many years of research and wisdom and often using the exact documents, the exact codes and statutes, the exact references, account names and things like that are held within restricted areas inside of agencies like the IRS, for example. Allow me just a moment here. I'd like to pull this up if I could and just, again, show the audience the trailer for this particular film project. It is evolving in real time. It's continuing forward, ongoing, and progressing, and it has now moved to the launch, if I'm not mistaken, here upcoming in just a couple of weeks, the launch of the second part of the broader film. So allow me just a moment.
Yeah, they've already launched a couple of movie releases in different theaters around the country, but the next one is actually July the 18th in Florida, just north of Orlando. And that's the Birthright. So everybody can find it, birthrightthemovie.com. I encourage you to you need to watch the first one if you haven't seen the first one, and then the second one is going to build on that and absolutely blow your mind about what's actually going on and how to affect remedy. And I encourage everybody to actually go to one of the screenings if you can, because there is Q&A before and after the screening, and then usually there's a luncheon afterwards where you can sit for hours on end and discuss these topics and see actual documents. Not only presented in the movies, but maybe additional stuff as well. So I personally like to bring documents with me so people can sit there and see it and hold it in their hands so they can see there's something tangible.
Incredible. Let's go ahead and play this and we'll be right back.
True government is all about one thing and one thing only. What is the will of the people? I don't think they've been running it that way for a very, very, very long time.
We have a very keen sense of impending doom.
Oh, it's easier to live in the matrix. Ignorance is bliss. I'm like, is it? Wait until they knock on the door and they want to stick something in your arm. Or they want to take your cake because you didn't chop something off for them. Is ignorance bliss that? I don't think so.
Government's out of control. It has nothing to do with political party. Government stopped doing things to secure our freedom and started doing things to us to take away our freedom.
They've been talking about how the United States is a democracy. We're a constitutional republic.
The Constitution requires a republican form of government for all states, but does not mention democracy, and neither does the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights.
Democracy is a form of government based upon the principle of majority rule. What would you call a lynch mob? That's majority rule.
The ideal of a constitutional republic is individual liberty.
We told government they could do 19 essential things for the states and no more. And now we've got 6.5 million pages of code, statutes, and ordinances.
We believed we were free, and in reality, the best slaves are the ones who believe they are free.
The law is whatever the powers that be in power happen to say it is today. And it may change tomorrow.
A birthright is anything that's given by God. It's unalienable. That means that no lien can be placed upon it.
It's to protect you from any opposing tyranny, whether it's government or anybody else for that matter.
So how can government have power over people who created it? Well, let's incorporate us so we can force them into the law of the water under contract called code, and now we can regulate and administer everything they do.
There is a higher law that dominates the entire world. It's called the law of the water, maritime admiralty.
So all governments can regulate is the commercial activities
between the states, but they've misconstrued it and they've pushed it all the way down to regulate commerce between you and your neighbor.
Could you go fishing, hunting, cut hair, and did you need a license? No, you didn't need licenses.
The United States Code, I mean, there's, I think, 52 titles, and each book is massive. You don't know what the law really is, right?
They are swimming around in their admiralty law over there, their rules, codes, ordinances, statutes, and they've trumped our Constitution. And we don't even stand up for that.
Now the relationship that the states have with the federal government is that of complete submission.
You no longer have states' rights.
How much deference we give to an agency in deciding what the law is.
The NIH, the CDC, the FDA, all of them are for-profit corporations that are not part of the 19 essential services over here. This corporate construct is what is destroying America.
Well, I found out that the Federal Reserve wasn't federal. If that's not true, what else isn't true?
The 16th Amendment was never properly ratified.
The original 13th Amendment isn't what it is today.
A warranty deed is not a title. The only title to land that there is a land patent.
Every crime is commerce.
You're looking for someone who committed a crime, but you're saying it's worth $1 million. How does it have a monetary value if it's a crime?
This one thing, the law, controls every aspect of our life, and yet they don't teach it to us.
How do we restore our republic? They gave us remedy. It's called the first 8 amendments.
We have a God-ordained civic duty to stand up and defend the Constitution, defend the liberty, the freedom that God gave us. These are our rights, and we're trampling on them.
My greatest hope is that we do the things necessary to reestablish our constitutional republic.
That's the way government's supposed to run. That's the way our founding fathers set it up. Stop the foreign agents. Come out of her, O ye Babylon, and have true, righteous, honest government of we the people.
So if we look at that, I want to just point out a couple things from that these are things that go into a lot more depth when you go and see episode 1 and episode 2. But in terms of how the government affected this, going back to World War I, World War II, and the bankruptcy, they implemented what was called the Administrative Procedures Act, which is Title V. And so a lot of these agencies that are operating as, I'll say, private corporations under the guise of being government entity are under Title V, 5 USC 551, 552. And so when you contract with these agencies in any way, shape, or form, that's the contract where you're waiving your constitutional rights under the Ashwander Doctrine. So a lot of this was laid down in 1944 through 46 or so, and that's where you see Administrative Procedures Act 1946, where they started creating these corporate entities to run the government agencies. 45, we have the International Shoe Company, where they finally admitted post Erie Railroad versus Tompkins that the government finally has jurisdiction over you as a living person, because you've contracted with them and you've waived your rights under the Ashwander Doctrine, which is Rule 6, right? You've waived your rights for benefits and privileges. You start accepting Social Security and benefits. You keep contacting all these agencies and saying, help me, help me, help me. When the reality is, a lot of people try to contact these agencies and they'll say, hey, I want to revoke this or revoke that. And the agency doesn't write back to it all. And it's because you don't have a contract with them. And so they're not going to just help you without a contract, right? Because there's nothing for them to do to you. So for example, like revocation of election, which is actually, a whole nother topic in itself. But yeah, you're contracting your rights away because you're using your public entity for benefits and privileges provided by the government, like, credit cards and loans and social services and things like that. If we want to be a constitutional republic, you got to do it on your own. You have to stop asking the government for help, and you have to stop using your name and contracting all over the place. And like I said before, that's by the creation and the structuring of private trust to operate your property and your banking and everything else that you're doing. So yeah, that's what we're kind of be getting into at the premieres for Birthright, the movie, is we're going to start talking about these next level, more advanced concepts for people so they understand that we don't have constitutional rights, we have administrative rights, legal rights, and it's all through contracts.
Powerful perspective. And it leads me directly into my last question here, Todd, and that deals with this macro concept of reverting the corporation to some sort of a republic again. You know, right now, President Trump occupies a position that I think is most accurately stated as the president of a defunct corporation under 28 U.S. Code, Section 3002, paragraph 15. Suppose for a moment that either the current president or another chief executive coming after him arrives into that office imbued with that power and connected through that Constitution instrument to the armed forces of the United States, which itself is a completely different domain and jurisdiction, and the blending of those into that single role. What would the process look like from the pulpit of the presidency for getting us away from a corporate construct, which really hijacked our republic around 150 years ago, and back towards what the American constitutional republic system was always supposed to be about?
Well, you know, the remedy that they had to give us, because remember, they can't take rights away and then not give a remedy, because that would be treason. And so understanding the core concept that the Constitution is a grantor revocable trust, we created it. We asked to create a government that could help us and assist us. And so we are the grantors and we're the beneficiaries of that contract that we created, and they're the trustees. So at a very core, level of understanding. And as soon as you go ahead and revoke and revest that, so you shut the trust down, right? The Constitution is a trust, so you shut it down, you revest it, meaning you now ordering them to do a final accounting and provide all of your assets back, money, property, send it back to the people, right? So you have the ability to do that under the Restatement of Law and Trust and the Merger Rule, that's Section 8.2.2.2. You have the right to revoke and revest under the system that's been enslaving us, which is the Internal Revenue Code, which is 26 U.S.C. 671 through 677. Now, under the administrative procedures, which they're operating under, 5 U.S.C. 3331, 3333, if they don't perform administratively in their fiduciary capacity, they are committing treason under 73.11. And so, yeah, this is a targeted approach to stay around the trust, revoke and revest, and make sure that the administrative agencies who have been accessing your restricted securities at the IRS, and by the way, anybody wants to know where your restricted securities are at, all you have to do is look at the Internal Revenue Manual, Part 25 for special topics, and you'll see that the restricted securities terminals are listed there. And how exactly do you affect going after the IRS to obtain access to that, to essentially correct your accounting? And I'm not talking about stealing from the IRS or the Treasury by filing fraudulent 1099As and OIDs and Bs and everything else where you're stealing money that doesn't belong to you. I'm talking about fixing your accounting records. So when you find that people have been fraudulently filing against you, like what the government's done to me in the last year with 4,120 1099As, which I now have in my possession, and have affected the correction with the IRS through a special offer and compromise that they put in front of me. If those tables do exist, they do have them. The issue is going after them and getting them in an effective way, so we can zero out the balances that may essentially be due on our ledgers that we're not aware of. Right. And remember, if you claim aggravated identity theft to the IRS and you say, I need access to my restricted securities to fix my accounting records, and they don't provide it to you, they say they don't have any. Well, that's 26 U.S.C. 6001. They're required to keep the books at all times. And if you revoke and revest your trust, now they're concealing it from you, 26 U.S.C. 7206. You now have a Section 1203 violation against any Internal Revenue employee that is required to give you your accounting so you can fix your books and we can help our country get back to zero and restart.
From bondage to empowerment. Todd, thank you very, very much for joining us again on Q News Patriot. The expertise you bring to these topics is unparalleled. And for the audience out there, I hope you've very much enjoyed this 250th birthday celebration for our cherished republic on the Q News Patriot. I'll be back with each and every one of you again soon on the Q News Patriot Rumble channel. God bless everybody. Stay safe today and enjoy your 4th of July weekend. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, SG.